and you find it helpful, please turn into the 16th chapter of Luke. I need to get my Bible. That'd be helpful. Okay. I got to get one off the pew. I left the thing at home. Becky always asks me, she goes down a whole list of things. Did you bring this? Did you bring that? You didn't ask me that this morning, so I give you the full responsibility for the fact that...
You were just checking you out.
I left my Bible at...
Walk on your own today.
That's right. I left my Bible at home.
Epic fail.
Epic fail. That's exactly right.
Pastor to be blaming his wife in church.
Well, I mean, it's easy. I'm up here and she's out there. You know, it's...
That's not on the standard list.
Okay, you're right. You're right. It isn't on the list. You're right. You're right. You're right. It's totally my responsibility. And I'm deeply embarrassed about it. So, all right. And this passage is one of those passages that we've all been in. If you've been in church for a little while, you've encountered this passage. And some of the lessons from it are very obvious ones. And I'm not going to bypass those obvious ones. But I think there are other lessons in it as well, which really speak to us in our present day. So I'm going to begin reading in verse 19. There was a certain rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen. He fared sumptuously with his meals every day. There was a certain beggar, however, named Lazarus, who was full of sores and was laid at the rich man's gate. He desired to be fed with the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table, and moreover dogs came and licked at the man's sores. So it was that Lazarus the beggar died, and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died, and he was buried. And being in torment in hell, the rich man lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham afar off and Lazarus by his side. He cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus that he would dip his finger into some water and cool my tongue, for I am in torment in this flame. Abraham said, Son, remember that in your lifetime you had good things, and likewise Lazarus had evil things. But now he's comforted, and you are tormented. And besides all of this, a great gulf has been fixed between us and you, so that those of you who want to pass from here to here cannot, and those of us who want to pass to you cannot. Then the rich man said, I beg you therefore, Father Abraham, would you send Lazarus to my father's house? I've got 5 brothers, that he could testify to them, lest they come to this terrible place of torment. Abraham said, they've got Moses and they've got the prophets. Let them listen to them. And the rich man said, no, Father Abraham, if somebody would just go back from the dead, they will repent. But Abraham said to him, if they don't hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though somebody comes back from the dead. Now this story this is Middle Eastern all the way. Jesus is taking wild juxtapositions here, a juxtaposition placing 2 opposite things together, and he's sticking them together so that there's this enormous contrast between this rich guy and this very poor guy. And there's something very important about that, which I'll get to in just a moment. But let's just look at the descriptions here. They're very vivid, especially the rich man. Both of them are vivid, but the rich man especially so. And some of these descriptive elements, if you don't know anything about the history, they wouldn't seem so descriptive for you. The first one is, he says, dressed in purple. Now, purple was a color that you couldn't get in the time that this was written. You could get it, but it was extremely expensive because it was made by only one means. They would have to go to a certain part of the Mediterranean. They would have to harvest these mollusks. I looked these guys up. I wanted to see what their shells look like. They're still with us today. They're called murex. It's a snail. They grow anywhere from 2 to 3 inches to 10 inches. And they've got the whirly shells just like a conch or any other snail. But the mollusk that's inside produces an ink in their body that's the color purple. It's a permanent dye if you can get it out, but it takes a bunch of them to get it. So if you had a piece of cloth, a cloak, a shroud, anything that was purple in that day, it would cost you the equivalent of a year's salary to buy it. Because that's how much of that stuff, people worked for weeks and weeks and weeks gathering. Just think, you've got to get the mollusk, right? And you've got to extract this dye from the mollusk and collect it, and it takes a lot of it to dye a piece of cloth. So it was very expensive. So when he says purple, the whole crowd would have gone, wow, what a rich person that is. Then he says another thing that might just pass us by. He says fine linen. All right? I want you, anybody in this room, I want you, everybody to just take I really want you to do this. I never ask anybody to do anything, but I want you to do this. I want you to just take a look during the time we're together here today at your shirt or your sweater or your pants, and look at the stitching in that shirt, sweater, or pants. I mean, I just take Al's shirt. Look at all the colors in that shirt. Think about, and if you get a magnifying glass and you take it out and you look at the threads that are in that shirt, no human being could stitch that shirt together unless they just had endless time and endless patience and were really, really good at doing that kind of thing. So when a person in this century had a shirt or a cloak or a tunic that was with stitching that fine, it might take 6 months' salary to buy it, because it would take that person about 6 months to make it. Think about that. Thousands and thousands and thousands of fine threads by hand to create a piece of cloth big enough to make our shirt. Nowadays, we go to Walmart and they're on sale for $15 this week. Thousands and thousands of threads in the shirt that I've got on. This is an inexpensive shirt, but in that day, this would have cost a fortune. So Jesus is painting a picture here that's really vivid. This rich man was rich. He also talks about the way the rich man eats. At this time in history, the average person might eat meat in their diet once a week, maybe. Most people never. Most people had bread and vegetables, and that was it. You notice Jesus talks about it, give us this day our daily bread. That's not just an expression like some kind of real homey by the fireplace in a nice room. Everybody, you see that picture that there's a Christian painting where you've got this fella, an older fella, he's got a white beard and he's got his hands folded, and there's a loaf of bread and a slice out of it and the butter and a candle, and he's praying over the bread. Give us this day our daily bread. For that time of history, that was your daily food. So this rich man, when he says a sumptuous diet, the people in the audience would have thought, wow, you know, this guy's eating meat. He's eating whatever he wants every day. Further, this guy would have had to have servants do this for him, because he would be Sabbath breaking to have the sumptuous diet on a Sabbath. So somebody's breaking the Sabbath. He's got people hired that are cooking for him so that he can have all of this. All of this is going on. Then you got Lazarus. The other end of the spectrum, as far away from the rich man as you could possibly get. He's just totally pitiful. You notice it says in the text he's laid at the gate. Guess what that means? He can't get there on his own steam. Somebody's got to bring him and put him there every day. He's got sores all over his body, and you think, I wonder what that's about. He's malnourished. He doesn't bathe properly and he's malnourished, and so he's got sores that never heal. They're ulcerated. And it's so pathetic that dogs are coming and licking at the sores. The dogs probably belong to the rich man, which is why they are there. Further, there's one aspect of this text that I just find utterly fascinating. It says, Lazarus longed to eat the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Now, in our minds, when I sit down, you can always see where I sat at a meal. You know, there's little bits of stuff all around my plate. I don't keep it all on the plate very well. So if I eat cereal, there'll be a couple of Fruit Loops or something out there laying on the table where I've spilled it. Do you do your cereal like this? I fill the bowl with milk. Then I pour a little cereal and eat it. Pour a little cereal. That way the cereal's crunchy the whole time. And I don't like it when it turns all soggy. So I add to it. So I'm spilling it the whole breakfast long. When I get done, there's stuff all around where I ate. That's the picture in our minds when we say he was waiting for the crumbs that would fall from the table. That's not the picture here. The picture is this. This time in history, people ate with their hands. They didn't have forks and knives and spoons. So What do they do when they want to wipe their hands or their mouth? A wealthy person would take a bit of bread and they would use that as a napkin throughout the meal, and they'd toss it on the ground. And that's what the dogs were waiting for too. So this Lazarus is so pitiful. He's waiting on the rich man to throw his napkins out. That's what he's waiting for to eat. It's funny too, the word Lazarus means God has helped. I mean, there's so much imagery here for this crowd. They're thinking, God has helped? I mean, look at him. He's covered with sores and he's waiting for crumbs. Dogs are looking at him, has to be laid at the gate. How's God helping him? And it's no accident where this text comes. It comes after the shrewd manager and all these teachings about money and greed and all of that. So Jesus, see, we read our Bibles and we see the heading. We think, oh, new thing. No, this is all one teaching. Jesus is just teaching. And these things are coming out as a continuum here. Now, what's the basic lesson? I don't want to bypass that. The basic lesson is the same thing we teach children. Everybody who's ever been around children as a parent or not can relate to this. Everybody who's ever been a child can relate to this. You're sitting there, two children, a little group of toys for them to play with. They belong to one of the children. And what do we say to the child to whom the toys belong about what they have to do with the other child to whom the toys do not belong? Got to share. Got to share. We teach children that, right? One of the most basic things. And it's hard. It's a hard lesson. Well, here we are all grown up, and it's still a hard lesson, right? What's the lesson? Do we have more than we need? Then we are obligated to share. It's just that simple. Same lesson that we taught the little children. Now look, when I say that, I traveled with Tony Campolo. And if you ever been around Tony Campolo, he would talk about the poor, he would talk about all that, and when he got done, all I wanted to do was take every dime, every article of anything that was worth anything I had in the whole world and sell it, all of it. And go to Goodwill and buy a bed sheet and cut a hole in it and stick my head through it and take all the rest of the money and buy Bibles and go out on a street corner in the wintertime and give them away till I died. That's how it looked to me. When Tony Campolo talked about sharing our wealth, that's the way I felt when I got done listening. I traveled with him for a couple of years, and after a while, you're pretty beat down by that kind of lesson. Look, God knows that there are times in our lives when the financial aspect of our life is the most important single feature of our life. He knows that. He knows that. This rich man is a Jew. You get that from the text. Father Abraham. He wouldn't say that if he weren't. So what's wrong here? What's the rich man doing? Well, for one thing, he's not paying any attention to his own scripture. Hosea says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire the acknowledgement of God, not burnt offerings, God says through the prophet. Well, he's not paying any attention to that at all, is he? Look, if we don't have, as believers, this goes all the way back to this moment in teaching history. If we don't have a merciful spirit, we cannot please God. Just settle that in our minds. If our spirit is not merciful, then something is wrong. We cannot please God. The sin of the rich man was he was just indifferent. He lived like an unbeliever, and what's worse, he didn't care about the fact that he was living like an unbeliever. A person can be a really nice person and yet disobey God's commands entirely. It can be done. It says too in the text, the rich man was buried. That's very significant detail. It doesn't say that about Lazarus. Did you notice that? It said that all it talks about is the afterlife for Lazarus. He dies and then he's with Abraham. He's gone to paradise. The rich man was buried. That means Lazarus was tossed into the valley of Hinnom as a piece of trash. That's where the bodies with all the really, really poor people were. There were two places. One was there was a pauper's cemetery. But it doesn't even say that. It just says Lazarus died. The other place was the Valley of Hinnom, where they burnt the trash. There were people out there, their whole gig was to keep that trash pile burning 24/7. That's probably where Lazarus went. So there's some teaching here about afterlife, right? Somebody's in a war, they get blown to confetti. God can take care of that. What happens to the body's not all that important. But look at what the irony here. The rich man says, send Lazarus to dip his finger in the water and cool my tongue. What part of the rich man was the most satisfied portion of his entire body? His palate. He was eating and drinking all he wanted of the nicest things. And now, the one thing he wants to have some help with is that Lazarus would bring some cool water and just cool his tongue off in this place of torment. Only once in this whole text does the rich man show any concern for anybody but himself. Only once. And that's when he shows concern for his brothers who are still on the earth. And he says, man, send Lazarus back to talk to them. If he comes back from the grave, they'll listen to him. Warn them. I'll tell you, take my word for it. When he says no, they won't listen, even if somebody comes back from the dead. That's absolutely true, because here we are 2,000 years later. One has come back from the dead, and people still aren't listening to this day. I correspond with lots of atheists. You know what the most common request is of me? Prove it. Prove it. If God really exists, let him prove that he's there to me. Jesus has come back from the tomb. That's not enough. I got to see something happen. And you know what that'll mean. Once that happens, then I got to see something else, and something else, and something else, and something else, until finally, it doesn't matter how much one is shown, they will not believe. That's why Jesus said that. That's why Abraham said that. You've got Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. It's the same today. We've got the Bible and the gospel. Listen to them. That's enough. That's enough. A couple of things here about this text that I think should resonate for us. Jesus, same guy that's giving this little teaching here, says, woe to you who are rich. You've already received your comfort. That's a stinging indictment to me. I got air conditioning. I got clothes, nice clothes. I got those fine threads all over. I got a place to sleep. I've got a car. You know, I've got everything I need, right? So what did the rich man actually do here? What did he really do? Well, I mean, he didn't demand that Lazarus be taken away from his gate. Get this piece of human debris away from my gate. I don't want to see him anymore. He didn't do that. He didn't seem to mind Lazarus trying to collect those crumbs as they fell, the napkins that he was wiping his mouth with and tossing off to the table, off to the ground. He didn't mind that. He didn't abuse Lazarus. Doesn't say that he came by and kicked dirt in his face or hit him or anything like that. He never was deliberately cruel to Lazarus. It doesn't say anything about that. What was his problem? He didn't care. That's the problem. The greatest sin this rich man committed was that he didn't care. He had the capacity. Think about this. This is really an indictment, I think. All he had to do was take Lazarus in and feed him and clothe him. That's all he had to do. He could have afforded to do that easily. Take him in, provide for his basic needs, and none of this would have been written as it is. He just didn't care. If anyone has, listen to these words from John. If anyone has material possessions and sees someone in need and has no pity, how can the love of God be in that person? Wow. God gives everybody in this room, everybody who calls his name, an opportunity to be salt and light for somebody who needs some salt and light. He gives us those chances. What are we doing with them? I'll tell you, don't we, when we do something for somebody who has great need, doesn't it feel really good to do that? I don't think that's an accident. I think that's the way we're built. And God gives us those chances to do for those people throughout our lives. It's a better way to live to take them than it is to walk past them. I don't know where everybody is today, but